Youthquake, as we've called it this morning in our Kickstarter, and how exactly the population can be turned into an opportunity. Welcome, I am Priscilla Regina Nalwoga. Now, when we look to the backbone of our conversation across Africa, be it the north, the south, the west, the east, and central over Africa, there's a silent revolution that is unfolding, and we see it with the most recent elections that have happened in the last 5 years. The youth being a critical element in the decisions that have been made for the democracy and governance of some of those countries, Tanzania and Uganda being the most recent ones for the case of East Africa. So it is a shared number of young people that are becoming of age, and they're not becoming of age in parliament, they're not becoming of age in boardrooms, they are becoming of age in every critical element of society. Today, Africa is having the youngest continent on earth, and if we go by the statistics that have been reviewed in some reports, by 2050, 1 in every people in the entire planet will actually be an African. And by the end of this century, nearly 40% of humanity could be living on this very continent. As they say, case in point, Uganda, the pearl of Africa. So everyone is coming here because of the good weather, the good soils, and the good people. Yet Africa is producing the world's largest future workforce. Millions of those remaining unemployed or underemployed or even untraceable as far as opportunities are concerned. So here in Uganda, the story is even more striking. You do have reports that are estimating 76% of Uganda's population below the age of 30 years. While the country's median age is just about 15.9 years. Now, this is making Uganda one of the youngest nations that we have, not only in Africa, but in the entire world. And this population is projected to be approaching 70 million by 2030. However, the question remains, with the young African population, what are the opportunities, or how can we harness this population as an opportunity? As is the saying of former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan, once observing that young people of Africa, they are not a burden. They are the continent's greatest resource. How do we convert that resource? The conversation is having the resource converters with me here in studio. To my extreme left, we do have Julia Muhumza, who's a youth politician, and she is bringing to this table expertise in policy and governance with the African perspective. Julia, good morning to you. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, and good morning to the viewers, especially the young people.
What opportunity have you received for just being a young person in this day and time?
That's really, really interesting because, like you mentioned, we are, as young people, for me, I honestly believe as young people, we are extremely talented, very ambitious. The energy we have is beyond the roof. But unfortunately, whereas we should be the biggest asset to this country or this continent, we still are the most marginalized. We are extremely excluded, and I think we are tending more towards being a liability. In Uganda, per se, I should say, young people, we are really a liability to this country. Why? Because you've given the statistics, yeah, over 76% are below 30. But when you go deeper, you realize that 51% of that 76 are not in employment, are not in education, are not in any form of training, or they identify as nets. Then you wonder, what then is our contribution to this country? Yeah, because if we are not in employment, we are dependent. Yeah, if we are not starting up something, you, for example, see again that, for example, the micro and small medium enterprises that make up 90% of the private-led economy in Uganda are largely owned by young people. But again, when you go in for trade, where you would say, okay, we expect these businesses to grow and employ more other people, you realize that most of them that are owned by young people are informal, and they lack, or they have like structural barriers, meaning that where they would even take advantage of trade or expand, we are also failing at that. And of course, most young people in startup will say maybe because of the absence of the startup bill, the tax framework, or the failure for us to know how to navigate the business registration, meeting compliance standards. There are very many things that we definitely point to, but I'm just painting a bigger picture to show you that for me, in Uganda, we young people are actually a liability. Those that are educated out of university have a skills mismatch. So you will come out, those that should employ you, they will say, we cannot employ you because you do not have the right skills. But again, besides those that come out to get employment, we are also seeing that in the education, Uganda can report to UPE, USE gains. But when you look at enrollment and completion rates, they are low. Yeah, for example, I'm seeing just at lower level, 25% complete. So where do they go? Yeah, looking at education gains alone, you realize the youngest population in the world have 80% of learning poverty, meaning 8 in 10 children cannot read and understand a basic sentence by age of 10. So with low literacy levels, how then are we the asset to the country? So for me, I think there must be deliberate effort and political momentum from the government to increase investments towards,
Speaking of which, we do have one that has recently actively participated in the general elections 2026, Marion Chirabo, at LC5 woman councillor level. This was in Makenere. It was a tough time for you coming from the party that you come from, the National Unity Platform. As you give us your opening remarks, if you could share what that experience was like for you through the lenses of being a young entrant into the space of politics and good governance and democracy.
Thank you so much. Good morning to our viewers and everyone watching. My name is Marion Chirabo. I stood for LC5 Woman Councillor, Makerere University, on the National Unity Platform ticket. I must say that it was a interesting and very grueling experience, I must say, for us young people who participated in the general elections. For me in particularly, the impunity and the violence that I experienced, the complete breakdown of the rule of law in the whole process, and the unfairness that if you were not part of the system, then you were someone who could be easily, how can I say, trampled over or discarded, perhaps. There was a lot of course, rigging. There was a lot of impunity. For us, a lot of our agents were not even allowed to, participate in the process. We could not provide the oversight that we had a right to as participants in that election. We had a lot of non-voters in our constituency flooding in, and the EC could not allow us to verify their votability. I think for me the most shocking thing is to see lorries of unknown people wearing masks coming to vote, and they were allowed in by police, and you're wearing a mask like you're an armed robber, but you're coming to vote. And it didn't matter our protests or pointing them out and handing them over to police. Police would release them. The UPDF deployment made it worse. There was nothing you could do. Even when you protested, armed people would come in and, carry you away. And yet you are the one who is being unfairly treated. And we had a lot of unverifiable people on the scene that were coming in to vote, and we could not verify them. So it was a very, I would say, disgusting process to witness as a young person, but also it showed the helplessness that we young people are in. We don't have, let me say, the state resources on our side, and therefore it showed a picture that because you have no state resources, you have no, first of all, let me say, money, you have no military on your side, you have no police on your side, you don't have the EC on your side, so your voice and your contribution is meaningless in the running of this country. That is what it went to show, that your vote, which is supposed to be, let me say, your voice is meaningless.
So that is
was
to
the
say
picture
that
that
your
it showed.
experience shows that the youth are a crisis being managed more than an opportunity being harnessed. Yes,
the youth are more like, let me say, we are more like we are just there to be worked upon, to be used however the state wants to use us. But retrospective, it's like we have no value, whether or not we want it, we have no contribution. It's like we have no contribution to the state of the affairs that are happening right now. You're just there to either be used as, let me say, mobilizer, or you're there to be used as a kind of vehicle for someone to fulfill their interests, but really you yourself are not part of the process in a meaningful way. Okay. I would put it that way.
Thank you so much, Varian. We're also being joined by Nelson Agava, who is a National League Coordinator with the ANT, but also Inter-Party Youth Platform Leadership. Agava, you're most welcome to the table of discussion. And from where you're seated and your experiences as a youth emerging leader, do you believe Africa's population is currently being received as an opportunity, harnessed as an opportunity, or it is a crisis being managed?
Thank you so much, and viewers, especially the young people here in Uganda and the entire Africa. Statistically, the United Nations Population Fund has come out to say, you know, with Africa there is a youth bulge. Having about 370 million young people between the age of 9 and 24 years. And everybody is worried whether it is an explosion or not. But from where I come from, I think that two things are important to note. One, we normally speak of demographic dividend. And that demographic dividend, for it to be real, we must focus on four things. I call them four pillars. Number one is that for anything, you need to have skills, skilled youth who are healthy, and those skills must match the job market. So as Africa, we need to invest on that. Number two, that young population that we have, you gave, Julia, I think you gave statistics of Uganda of 51% in need. For Africa, 76 million young people are not in education, not in employment, not in training. So to do all that, we must ensure that the young people need to access some money. So if they are skilled, then they need to have access to resources, to capital, to be able to make even and create jobs. Because we do not have actually an employment problem. The actual problem is the job creation problem. So we need to ensure that jobs are made, but you cannot make jobs when you do not have the skilled. And if you have the skills without the capital, you will remain toothless. You will not act. And the other aspect is about, the third one is about policies. Because you need to have policies that include youth, that youth who influence policies on the table, but not, you know, we keep saying youth being on the table. You must have a vote. Youth must have a vote on that table. And then lastly, and which is most of the problem that we have here in Africa, is governance question. We have governance that really does not work for the biggest population. So if we want to fix, if we want to see that demographic dividend work in 2070, where we're talking of if we take charge, if we invest in skills, in health, having youth responsive policies, and having good governance, functional systems that don't work across Africa, I mean that work across Africa, then we are not a disaster. We are an opportunity, as you said, for the entire continent,
Okay.
and the world at large.
All right. Julia, as your expertise on policy and governance, which is something that he has hinted on, where did the disconnect begin from that we are having such statistics that are presenting youth as a burden, as a problem, as a challenge for governments?
I think the biggest problem that those in governments across Africa have faced, or they have deliberately done, is to look at young people as beneficiaries. Yeah, we're supposed to be, from the policy framework, we're supposed to be looked at as drivers. Yeah, if it's agro-industrialization, what role are young people supposed to play in that? Yeah, if it's every policy, is it now, for example, Uganda is looking at ATMS as priorities. I mean, there is potential to create more jobs if it pulls through. I think even the budget now reflects exactly that. But again, what's the whole point of investing money in the mineral sector if young people cannot compete? They do not have the technical skills to actually take advantage in that sector. So there is a gap. But if you look at young people as drivers, as key participants in that, to create a meaningful contribution, then you will know, okay, there is a gap. But again, the other problem we face is we're having very many actors work in silo. Yeah, we have civil society skilling, we have government skilling. You look at the skilling hubs in Uganda, the presidential skilling hubs, some of them take like 5 or 6 people every 6 months. With this big population of young people, then you go to like UNDP, takes about 50, I think, in their skill. So we have very many actors skilling in silo. Why is it so hard to build an ecosystem to make something work? Government, this is our contribution. Who else can we bring on the table? Bring them together. If it's skilling, do a mass skilling. And also, we need to move away, I think, from the policy perspective. We have very beautiful policies on paper, but in terms of accountability, in terms of implementation, that's the biggest problem. Why? For example, you look at Uganda, from the tracking and implementation accountability framework, all we do is tick off the box. Yeah, we are trying to say, okay, we are skilling, or we are giving young people money in PDM. Tick off the box. But when you go, you realize that we are tracking the inputs. Did we give the money? Yes, we gave the money. So we shall say, as government, we gave the money to the young people to benefit. Yet in actual sense, we've given them money, but we've not trained them on how to use the money, or are they even the right beneficiaries getting the money? So I think we also need to get down to tracking outcomes. For example, I'll take you back to education. I'm a strong believer that human capital development is the cornerstone of everything we want to achieve, the 10x growth strategy. The reason I'm taking you back to education is you realize that, okay, we shall say we have UP in place, we have US in place. But I've told you, when you look at the statistics, yes, we can have enrollment, but they are studying, but they're not learning. They're not learning how to count, they're not learning how to read. So I think the bigger picture is we need to understand that it takes a community to get something done, but also from government. We have so little money that we are just spending without holding to account. We borrow so much money that we do not even use rightfully. So I just want to say that I think we need to move to a point, Africa generally, where you talked about the governance issue. For me, I think the biggest problem with that governance is accountability. Where we allocate resources, we need to account for it, and also look at young people as key drivers in the economy, not as beneficiaries. Okay,
rightful resource allocation, because it could be allocated to the minerals, as you said, but there are not many traceable young people in the mineral sector. Coming to you, Marion, so many people, especially the young ones, we see them now opting to go into politics, and not really primarily because they want to represent their people and, you know, fight for better policies and better resource allocation. But it is now being seen as an alternative way of living or having a living. Is this being driven by a desire to really serve, or is it that economic opportunity mismatch?
I think you can say both. If you have a population, let me say, across Africa that needs, let me say, 10 million jobs to be produced annually, and you're only producing 3 million, that means that you're leaving about a gap of 7 million people with nowhere to go. And then for most of the governments, African governments, unfortunately in Africa we have a leadership problem. Our politics, whether you go to Nigeria or you go to Uganda or whichever African country you can point out, there are very few countries that can actually brag of a leadership that works for the people and is responsive to the people's needs. If we take, for example, Uganda, you would see that the average MP earns about 30 million, let's say, approximately that, if you put in, the allowances and the salary all together. And each year they keep on wanting to increase their salary. Vis-a-vis a common, let me say, Ugandan graduates fresh out of university, we produce about approximately 700 graduates every year. Only 200,000 of these people are going to be absorbed into the formal sector, which leaves the others to then find their way into the informal sector. I have a number of colleagues who are graduates and they had to turn to border in order to make a living because they could not get a job in formal employment, right? But their belief was that they have been told all their lives that if they work hard, they get that degree, they will get that job and have, you know, a decent living or a decent life, and then they get to know that actually the reality is different. So he goes into border sector, but you have KCCA saying that, you know, no, we don't want you in town. Go to the outskirts, maybe somewhere else, but you are congesting, you know, the city. Or you have someone who has now turned to hawking because, you know, they, at the end of the day, they need to put food on the table, but they're saying, you know, you cannot work because you don't have a trading license. But I mean, I'm doing everything I can to survive. So at the end of the day, this young person comes to the realization that politics is affecting them even when they are not participating in it. KCC is on their door. The policies, the education policies that are made by Parliament have a mismatch between what the job market needs and what they actually studied in school. It's no longer relevant. So this young person is pushed to say that, you know, the only way I can survive is if I either get in there because maybe the salary can help sustain me, but also I have to get in there to make sure that I create a country where I can earn a decent living. So it's twofold, that I'm a young person, but I understand that if I do not get into Parliament and try to fight so hard for this tax regime to come down, for the interest rates to come down, I will never be able to live in this country and have a meaningful existence in this country. But then also, for the means of survival, this route is the only way where I can feed my family and perhaps also get opportunities, because we read the same newspapers where we say that certain ministers get, you know, their family members into public service even without the credentials that we need. We have been seeing stories from URA, the fact that people are employed even without the satisfactory credentials. So a young person watching all this has the understanding that this politics, whether I want it or not, it is affecting my life, and it might be the only means that I have to survive. If I have, they're cutting down, let me say, contributions to, they're cutting down the budget for health, they're cutting down the budget for education, and they're increasing MPs' salaries, and, you know, they are increasing, they are passing, we were talking about loans here, they're passing loans. Recently, we were listening to a member of Parliament complaining the fact that they didn't even know the contract, they didn't even know the loan agreement, they hadn't seen the loan agreement, and they're forced to pass a loan whose agreement they haven't seen, and yet we're saying that 40% of our budget is going towards servicing these loans. So this is money that could have been used in the education sector. It could have been used, let me say, in boosting industries in our country so that people get jobs. But you're seeing it's going to loans that are not even having oversight. So whether we like it or not as young people, whether it is for personal interest or it's as a means of survival, the politics is affecting us. So we have no other means than to get involved for our own survival.
All right. Nelson, you are on a quest of engaging young people in the democracy of our country politically, and you having interacted with them from various walks of life. What is your picture on the element of, is it really a true desire to lead this country to where they want it to be meaningful for them, or is it the fact that, hey, as a leader, I earn 40 million without doing much, just going to parliament 3 times a year and I'm given money?
Yeah, if research is made out there, an independent research, you realize that actually members of parliament are poor. Well, yes, most of them are poor. And that's where the problem happens. People are running to politics for survival because systems that would have enabled them live a decent life have failed. So all they do is, let's go to politics, not with the heart and spirit to work for the country, to work for the people, but with the spirit and mindset of, I will survive. It's about me, my family, and my, those who are close with me. We lack, and we have a leadership crisis, not because young people are not in leadership, or not because, so the problem is about the character and the culture by the people we have chose to be our leaders. We need, as a population, as a country, to think deep to ensure that members or leaders that we elect are members that are very concerned about, for example, 40 years, 70 years from now. That whichever decision, whichever policy that is being made or passed puts into account of 50 years from now. That's how we'll be helped. But when we have leaders who really think of it is about them and about young people, I think it is high time. For example, the youth leagues, people who want to be leaders, let them invest time in learning what leadership is all about, what governance is all about. It is not by accident that you get into a position, because we know we have had leaders who come by way of a wave by accident, and they are not delivering. So nothing will happen by accident. We must deliberately take action, invest in mentorship, in capacity building, in learning, in research that puts this country first, that looks at how do we make 2040 of our country, Uganda, a Singapore. Whatever we do then will be determined, will be inspired by the vision. But when we are just short-sighted, then our country will go to the dogs. Okay. That's what I'm thinking. And for the youth,
address that mindset you're referring to.
That mindset has to start today by some of us, by speaking out what exactly should be done. And I urge, for example, leaders, youth leaders in political parties, let this thing of having youth as political mobilization tools, who are just machines to gather, to mobilize support. Mm-hmm. Let youth leagues be, for example, policy incubators. Let them, you learn from the young age on how you process policies, how you research about a policy, how do you have a policy alternative. And I can say, for example, in the ANT, we have started and we are doing it. As of next week, we will be presenting a policy paper, alternative paper, about how they should handle medical interns and many other things. So if we have several young people who are engaged in critical thinking, in brainstorming, in research, in speaking of what has to be done for the better Uganda 2040, then we are going to have numbers. We are going to have many people who think that line. The more we have more people who think positively, who think about the future, who think about the country you know, first than the people, then that will be the dominant voice that will influence the culture of how people behave, of how people think, and treat the country at large.
Okay, Marion, what, from your experience, what do you believe can be the adopted solutions or mechanisms that can actually change the narrative that young people are a burden or they should be managed instead of harnessed as an opportunity?
This might sound radical, and maybe to some people. As a political organizer, I have long lost belief in. I don't think it's about mindset change or anything like that. I think as young people, we do know what the issue is, and well, for us in most African countries, we do know that our governments are the issue, but. Help is not going to come unless we take the initiative as young people across the continent to actually mobilize ourselves, organize ourselves, and put and say that, you know, as Africa, we are saying no to bad governance in each and every country, and we are mobilizing ourselves as young people to say that we deserve better as a continent. I'll give an example of some of the struggles that we've gone through. Let me say the decolonization struggle. We, as Africans, we came to a point that, you know, we are going against colonial powers that have state resources. They have better weapons than us. They control the economies. They have the power necessarily. But even when we have nothing but our bodies and, you know, our voices to fight, if we work together and organize ourselves, we can actually get rid of these colonialists. I think as African youths, we have to come to that point again, borrow that same spirit, and say that I am a Ugandan. There is UPDF, it has all the machinery, state resources, perhaps even funding from Western powers. I am a Nigerian who, my government perhaps is corrupt and the military is against me, and I cannot live meaningfully in this country. Or I'm a Tanzanian, anytime I can be kidnapped and abducted. But if as African youths we come together and say that, you know, we all face the same troubles, we all face the same bad governance, how then can we work together to amplify each other's voices in each of our countries to say no to bad governance? How can a Ugandan help a Nigerian, or a Nigerian help a Ugandan? We saw this in the decolonization movement, whereby certain countries would, certain African countries would send resources to activists in South Africa in order to fight the apartheid government. There has to be that kind of, that shared struggle, because no matter how many policies we're going to write, no matter how much mindset we're going, we all know the issue. It's not that young people do not know, it's just the helplessness of what do I do? This person has the money, they have the military on their side, I can disappear. Okay. So there is a need for, one, solidarity as us Ugandans. We are in a situation where there's a breakdown of the rule of law. Our colleagues, our family members, our friends are being kidnapped. But the thing is that our silence is too loud.
Okay. Julia, what do you think is actually aiding the silence more than the collaborative action that is being referred to by Chirabo?
One, we have a collective action problem where, for example, take an example of medical interns. It affects all of us young people, but we've looked at it as, oh, the one studying medicine, fight your own battles. Yeah, so young people, one, we tend to think that if I do not benefit from it, if it's not affecting me directly, then I'm not part of it. That's one, which is a big problem. Because when you look closely into the medical interns issue, I go to hospital and we know these are the people that work in 24/7 in these government hospitals. But beyond the collective action problem, there is also a free rider issue. You know that, okay, for me, Julia, even if I keep quiet, Marion is speaking up. That is really problematic. And also the thinking and feeling of politics is not my business. I did engineering, or I'm a teacher, so politics. But like Marion said, at the end of the day, whether you like it or not, politics will reach your doorstep through services, through anything, at any point in time. It does, whether you're a professional or not. And I think that is one of the reasons some of us, it has pushed us from our comfort zones to say we shall join politics, not that it's really a fun field, but because we really need intentional people at the forefront. But also, I want to say that to young people, we have something in our generation that didn't happen many years ago, and that is social media. This is a very unifying tool from communication. It makes us more aware of our issues. But the problem is we have looked at it more of maybe a mode of communication, watch TikToks or whatever. Some people are even getting livelihoods from it. But I think for me, it is a tool that would work best in organizing us. I think over time we have seen the benefits of the organization that happens online. They don't even make it to the streets, but that organization actually yields eventually. It brings into probing and accountability and a few reshuffles here and there.
This is to say the ex-president of Ugandans on X should be doing such work. Anyway, as we come to the round of this conversation, the end part of it, I believe that there are recommendations from your different fields and perspectives that, if adopted by the Ugandan government in the next 5 years, could go a long way in turning the population into an economic advantage, a political advantage, and really an African advantage. Let me start with you, Nelson.
Yeah. First is we need to get away from the speech good policies and have real action taken. Let what is passed be implemented as intended, not diversionary. Two, let's have, we need to change the way we, because of the corruption, we have the corruption problem. And the corruption problem is by character, by failure of systems that have been failed by design. Because this corruption here, it is a design. It is easy to fight if you choose to fight this corruption. So we must fight corruption. The money that we lose in corruption, let it be reallocated to priority areas that have been brainstormed through focused research groups that inform government on where to invest and where not. Okay. Then let's, as government, again, let's refocus and think. For once, think about Uganda as a country in 50 years, in 70 years to come. That in 20 years from now, we are going to be 100 million people. When you're talking of infrastructure, for example, we are talking of social media and technology. What is our investment plan on digital infrastructure to ensure that people, because people have phones, someone has a phone, but some of it is just a camera tool. In conclusion, I call upon young people, let's refocus. Let's come together. Let's have a joint voice. Let's think that this country, we are the ones in charge. Okay. And without us having a vote on that table, we are just tools being used for, for the end of the politicians who want to gain from whatever they are doing.
I think for me, and this is to governments and the youth in general, this continent is our home. It is all we have. Even if you go to, say, Saudi Arabia or Canada, you'll still be seen as a foreigner, you'll still be seen as a black person from the African continent. So if we do not organize our politics, our economy, our countries, there is no other place that we will ever find comfort or refuge. Therefore, as young people, we need to overcome our fear and start fighting for ourselves and our countries. Okay. We need to come together and find any means possible to make sure that we achieve the Africa that we want. No one is going to give it to us on a silver platter. Human beings are selfish by nature. So it is upon us to be like, this is the Africa that we want, this is the Uganda that we want, and we're willing to do anything to make sure that we get what we want.
Thank you, Marion. Julia?
To our leaders, get closer to the young people. We are more than willing to work with you. And then emphasis, skill, 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 skill. Those that are out of education, those that are in education, we all need upskilling to be in position to meet not only the jobs for today, but the jobs for the future. And then most importantly, I think we need to move on from looking at TVET as what we look at it. We look at it as a secondary option. This should be our primary driver of skilling, especially in Africa. And then intentionally invest, and let's cease working in silo, or government or the actors come to the same table and think and do massive to take advantage of the big numbers of young people. And finally, to all of us young people, we all have a role to play. We can choose to lament and lament every single day, or we can choose to make a meaningful contribution, no matter how small, to our country and our continent.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julie. You've mentioned the word lament there, and it came to my head that even the book of Lamentations in the Bible has other books. Many books that come thereafter. So Africa's youth population has always often been seen and perceived as a challenge, but yet history gives us the opportunity to also see it as something that we can harness in order to build the 50 years, the 100 years, and the many more futures that are being presented on this table. So if properly educated, as Julia has made reference to, if properly skilled and connected, as Marion and Agaba have made reference to, and empowered, the young people can actually become the workforce, the innovators, the leaders that can drive the continent's next chapter of growth. And this is growth from the politics to the other sectors that influence really where the future is going as a globe. So as the African proverb does remind us, the best way to predict the future is to prepare for it, which has been resounding on the table here. So thank you so much, Julia Muhumuza. Thank you so much, Marion Chirawo, and thank you so much, Nelson Agaba, for bring us up to the speed of light that we need to move yesterday so that today we are able to make a mile of step. I am Priscilla Regina Nalwaga. We end this discussion. More coming up. We do have Stephen Bide that will be coming up